Hello, welcome to your home study. So to get started with, we're going to look at diatonic chords along the A string, and in particular we're going to look at it in C major. Now, diatonic means in the key, so anything within a key. Chromatic means outside the key. So in the previous video we looked at diatonic chords along the E string in G major. Squeeze it in, I'll play it down here. So we're going to do the same thing but along the A string and look at it in C major. So before they were E shape, now these are in A shape. So we've got C major, and then we've got an A shape D minor, an E shape D minor, sorry, A shaped E minor, then A shaped F, A shaped G, A shaped A minor, then we've got this A shaped B diminished, which is first finger on the A string on the 14th, second finger on the 15th fret of the D string, little finger on the 16th fret of the G string, and then third finger on the 15th fret of the B. Down an octave it looks like this. And then you're back to a C major. So this is following the diatonic pattern for chords in a key, which is major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, then you're finished. So just like we did in G major, we've got major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished or half diminished, and then major. Okay, the reason why we're looking at this is so that we can actually play different type diatonic chords around the neck, or we also know different chord shapes along there. Now this is going to help what we're going to look at next, which is looking at some typical modal progressions. So if we go back to looking at our chords in G major, because also in the last lesson we looked at the 7 shapes of the major scale in G major. Now these 7 shapes of the major scale could be any of the 7 modes. Now the thing that actually makes them a certain mode is what's actually happening behind the chord. So imagine like your chords are your canvas and your notes are like the colours that you're painting on the canvas. So you know, if your canvas is white, then you know red's going to look like red. But if your canvas is blue, then red might look a bit more brown or something like that. So you know, I hope that makes sense. But you know, depending on what is behind the notes, makes it sound a certain way. So for example, if we look back in G major, because we were looking at our 7 shapes in G major. So we've got our 7 shapes there. So if you're not sure about them, look at the previous video and then and do a little bit of practice on them. So, for example, if we take the first shape, which we call our Ionian, the Ionian shape, that could be the major scale. So because we're in G major, if it's played over the first chord, then it sounds like a major scale. So for example, let's look at a typical progression, like a typical major progression. Now, if we take the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord in sequence, which was, if we go along again, we had 1 is major, 2 is minor, 3 is minor, 4 is major, 5 is major. So we've got the 1, 4 and 5. Oh, sorry. play them as the A shapes, which is why we also looked at some shapes along the A string, sorry. So we've got the G, the 4 chord is a C, and the 5 chord is a D major. Okay, so now that's a typical major progression, or Ionian progression, which is 1, 4, 5. So if you used the first shape or even the second shape over that, so I just kind of played around with the second shape. Obviously I haven't got chords behind me, but if you played, maybe experiment with this. So if you put on a G major backing track on YouTube and then play these different scale shapes over the top and just have a bit of a play around with them. So even if we started in the third shape, which we call the Phrygian shape, but if it was over a G major backing track, then all of these shapes are going to sound Ionian, or like the major scale. Now, here's where it could change. So now if we played some diatonic chords, but to make it sound more Dorian. So let's start, we know that Dorian is the second mode of the major scale, so let's start with the second chord in the sequence of chords. So the second chord in G major is A minor. So if we start with A minor, and then maybe go to D major. So. Maybe we do that. So if we go, we're going to go A minor, G major, E minor, C major. Now these chords are all in the key of G major because we've got A minor, which is the second chord, D major, which is the 5 chord, E minor, which is the 6 chord, and then C major, which is the 4 chord. So now if we play it like this. I was playing around a bit with the second shape there, or what we know is the Dorian shape, but playing any of these shapes. So now if you put into YouTube A minor, A Dorian backing track even, don't put A minor, A Dorian backing track, and then you played all of these shapes in the key of G major, any of them, all these notes would start sounding like A Dorian. So do you see how, depending on what what chords are behind it, but also the sequencing of chords. So the first chord progression that we looked at, the home center was kind of like G major, but the second one, it kind of sounded all right. The home center was kind of A minor chord, but because of the other chords in the sequence, which belong to the key of G major, that makes that progression A Dorian. And then you can play any of these shapes that you've learned along the E string in G major, and it would sound Dorian. Now, lastly, let's look at one more chord progression. So maybe if we look at making it sound more Phrygian. So Phrygian is the third mode of the major scale. So we want to maybe start with the third chord diatonically, which is a minor chord, which in this case G, A, B is going to be. So maybe if we look at doing B minor, A minor, so let me just think about this. So we've got B minor, so maybe we do something like that. So C minor, E minor, and then we go to a D major, and then a C major. So we've got B minor, E minor, D major. The notes of G major over that, it would sound Phrygian. So maybe try on YouTube now, type in B Phrygian backing track, and then play any of these scale shapes in G major along to that, and it would sound Phrygian. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight of how to start using those 7 scale shapes, diatonic scale shapes, and actually make them sound modal. And also a bit of an insight into how you can form modal chord progressions, so that maybe you could even make your own backing tracks and then solo over the top, and know that you're playing in Dorian, or you're playing in Phrygian or Ionian. So have a little practice. Watch this video a few times to get the understanding of it. Remember, watch the first video as well, just to kind of make sure you've got all the bits to help you with this video. And I'll see you next lesson. Nice one.